I hurt you, then comfort you. I make you cry, then make you laugh. That's trauma bonding. You'll crave my approval and fear my anger. Here's how I keep you addicted to the cycle. I remember the evening clearly, every single detail meticulously set and controlled as if it were a high-budget theatrical production designed solely for my benefit. The background music was playing softly, something classic, soothing, and entirely non-offensive, ensuring a state of calm susceptibility that lowers your defenses. The expensive, specific vintage wine was perfectly decanted and poured into the perfect thin-rimmed glasses, and the atmosphere was absolutely perfect. The kind of carefully constructed perfection I manufacture specifically for that essential, life-affirming feeling of being worshipped and adored without reservation or question. This intensive stagecraft is a necessary prelude. It's the love-bombing phase that establishes the contrast for the abuse that follows. I had been on my absolute best, most flawless behavior for a full week, consciously wearing the mask of the ideal partner, the generous, thoughtful, utterly stable, and emotionally intelligent man you believed you had finally found. I was charismatic, attentive, completely present, hanging on to your every word as if it were the most fascinating, brilliant lecture I had ever heard, validating your every thought and feeling with intense, mirrored focus. You actually looked at me like I was the hero of your life, the one person you could truly rely on for absolute stability and overwhelming joy, the safe harbor in a chaotic, unpredictable world. That look, that total adulation, that complete, unquestioning belief in my inherent goodness, that's the highest, most exquisite proof I exist, and the only mirror that reflects anything back that I can tolerate seeing. It's the essential, irreplaceable fuel I need to keep running, because without it, I simply cease to function as real, and the world turns instantly gray, menacing, and terrifying. Every compliment you give me, every soft touch you initiate, every moment you prioritize my desires and emotional needs over your own, is a high-octane injection keeping my fragile internal system online and functionally intact. I craft those environments perfectly, down to the soft lighting, the exact temperature of the room, the specific position of the furniture, and the right wine vintage, because the setting must seamlessly match the grand theatrical performance of my ideal self. Any imperfection in the environment, any small flaw, is a potential distraction from the perfection of me, and that cannot be tolerated. The slightest deviation threatens the illusion and risks exposure. The show must go on flawlessly, or I break, and the subsequent rage is inevitable. But maintaining the mask, the flawless performance of that idealized character, day in and day out, it's absolutely exhausting. It requires a tremendous, continuous drain of mental resources and emotional suppression, actively keeping that charming, flawless character in place 24 hours a day, year after year. The psychological cost is immense, manifesting as chronic boredom and an empty pit of fatigue, and the strain eventually shows in unpredictable bursts of rage or icy withdrawal. The terrifying truth is, the thing I keep hidden beneath the surface is just a ruin, a derelict, abandoned structure, a storage unit for old shame, unbearable pain, and things I can't look at, a vast, echoing, deep chasm of inadequacy and worthlessness where a substantial, resilient sense of self should be. So I deploy the mask, this brilliant, witty, superior entity that is incapable of doing wrong, incapable of making mistakes, and incapable of failure. It's a decoy, a psychological shield, a lightning rod designed specifically to attract all the positive attention and deflect all the negative energy and criticism. It's the decoy that does all the heavy lifting in relationships, the emotional labor, the charm, the grand promises, the one who earns the praise, the trust, and the adoration you shower upon it. You fall in love with the decoy, an idea of perfection that never existed in reality, not the me that's really there, because the real me is too terrified of being seen and instantly rejected. And when you inevitably try to peer behind the mask, when you try to get too close to the emptiness, when you start asking challenging questions that suggest I might be less than perfect, less than omnipotent, or just simply human, I have no choice but to punish you immediately and severely to reestablish the necessary distance and reinforce the boundaries of the mask. It's not malice, you must understand. It's not even personal hatred. It's pure animalistic self-preservation, a defense mechanism firing rapidly and without moral consideration to save the host from annihilation. I can't let you see the void, because if you see it, you'll recoil in horror, you'll inevitably leave, and if you leave, I will suffer a terrifying, complete sense of total annihilation and the collapse of my entire world and identity. I knew, in that precise moment of manufactured perfection, when the feeling of control was highest and the silence was most fragile, that I desperately needed to create some necessary distance and inject chaos into the system to relieve the unbearable internal pressure of maintaining the illusion of perfection. The adoration was getting too intense, too sticky, too close to the boundary where you might accidentally discover the truth about my fundamental lack of substance and deep fraudulence. I could feel my own emotional control slipping beneath the crushing weight of the performance, the strain threatening to shatter the mask and expose the ruin beneath. So I instinctively decided it was your turn to take the blame for the discomfort and terror I was feeling. I had to knock you down, reduce your confidence and self-worth to a manageable size, and create an urgent emotional emergency where I was clearly the superior, moral, and suffering party, the wronged innocent, so I could rebuild myself immediately using your submission, your desperate efforts to appease me, and your endless emotional labor to comfort me. This inversion of reality is the key. You know, I said, leaning back just enough to appear detached and slightly wounded, projecting an air of deep, profound disappointment that cuts deeper than any outright anger, watching your face carefully, measuring the precise impact of every syllable on your vulnerability. I can't believe you actually told Mistress Harrison about our private issue with the money. That was completely out of line, an utter violation of our intimacy, and utterly humiliating for me. I trusted you with that vulnerability, and you completely weaponized it against me, just like everyone else eventually does. I thought you were different. Your eyes went wide, reflecting the perfect picture of confusion and genuine shock. The feeling of being completely blindsided and unfairly attacked was precisely the intended effect. You looked physically hurt and bewildered by the sheer audacity and baselessness of the accusation. What? I didn't tell her anything. Why would I possibly do that? I respect our privacy completely. You know I would never say a word to anyone. That's a monstrous thing to suggest. The denial was reflexive, immediate, and utterly sincere, which was exactly the desperate defensive reaction I needed to confirm my superior psychological advantage and secure your submission to my false reality. I could see you searching your memory, frantically cycling through the events of the last week, trying to recall a conversation that never happened, frantically replaying scenarios in your head to find the flaw in your own behavior that would somehow explain my rage and accusation. Good. The confusion is paralyzing, clouding your thoughts and consuming all your mental resources and focusing on an impossibility. I had you exactly where I wanted you, in a state of defensive disbelief, unable to address the core problem, my spending, because you were too busy defending your own basic character and integrity against a fabricated charge. This is blame shifting in its purest, most efficient, and most toxic form, and the predictability of its success means it works every single time without fail. It's a classic psychological sleight of hand, instantly redirecting all attention away from the offender's demonstrable actions and onto the target's fabricated character flaws, leaving them scrambling for justice. You were originally trying to hold me to account for the simple, demonstrable fact that I'd carelessly spent too much on the new timepiece without consulting you, which would require me to admit a lapse in judgment and financial control, a mortal sin against the mask of perfection. But accountability means acknowledging I have flaws, and admitting flaws means the mask cracks irreversibly. And if the mask cracks, I vanish instantly into the bottomless pit of shame I desperately run from. I cannot allow that to come to pass. The shame is too great and too terrifying to bear, so it must be immediately transferred, projected, and permanently affixed to you, my designated repository of fault and imperfection. So, I shifted the entire focus instantly and brutally, using a complete, well-timed fabrication, a narrative I knew would wound you deeply because it attacks your integrity and loyalty. I accused you of gossiping and betrayal, a flaw you would hate to possess, a grave violation of trust that you would feel psychologically compelled to vehemently deny and fight against to save your integrity and our future. It's the perfect deflection, a brilliant chess move that completely turns my genuine financial irresponsibility and lack of emotional control into your fabricated moral failing and unforgivable betrayal. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice hardening into a low, dangerous, unforgiving tone that promised escalating conflict and punishment until you submitted and cried, watching the shock settle into deep, painful hurt on your face. "It's completely impossible to trust you when you behave like this, carelessly sharing my most sensitive secrets with others. I try to share things with you, sensitive things that make me vulnerable and human, and you immediately run off and tell everyone who will listen. Honestly, I wouldn't have even bothered to tell you about my personal financial problem, which is embarrassing enough and strictly private, if I had known you were going to behave like this. You have completely betrayed my trust, and you made me regret opening up to you. You made me regret opening up to you." That is the golden phrase, the nuclear option of emotional manipulation, delivering maximum guilt. It's the perfect rhetorical weapon that completely inverts the roles, making the true victim responsible for the abuser's actions and turning the narrative entirely on its head. I love the sound of it because it signifies absolute victory, the total surrender of the target and the successful deflection of all negative energy and consequence back onto the source of the criticism. In 2 devastating sentences, I went from the person who spent too much money and broke financial trust to the eternal victim of your alleged carelessness and moral betrayal. I was the one who was wounded, the one who was morally wronged by your alleged carelessness and gossip, suffering silently. My own reckless spending? Annulled. It disappeared entirely from the conversation and from the realm of things we needed to address or fix. The entire dynamic instantly pivoted into a circular argument about your trustworthiness, your decency, and your fundamental commitment to the relationship, a fight you could never win. I watched you immediately drop the timepiece, the real, tangible issue that threatened my self-image, and start frantically defending your honesty and good intentions, begging me to believe you and validate your reality. I didn't. I promise. I would never. You know me better than that. Please believe me and stop punishing me with this silence. Just talk to me. You were absolutely taking the bait, hook, line, and sinker, completely consumed by the need to clear your name. You were so desperate to prove you were good, worthy, and truthful that you completely accepted the new false premise of the argument, forgetting the original offense entirely as your focus shifted to emotional survival and peace. You are now entirely on the defensive, using all your energy and emotional reserves, trying to regain my approval, instead of holding me to account for my actual, demonstrable actions. This is the precise mechanism that generates a trauma bond, a destructive, self-perpetuating cycle of extreme distress followed by intense relief and subsequent dependence on the source of the distress. I created the injury, the devastating emotional wound with the false accusation, and then I created the only path to healing, proving your innocence to me and earning my conditional temporary forgiveness. You became fundamentally addicted to the immediate relief of my temporary forgiveness and the cessation of the hostility. That sudden rush of relief, the calm after the emotional storm, is neurochemically more compelling and addictive than the simple, enduring, boring truth of a stable, healthy relationship, hijacking your reward system. The machine-like brain I use to operate allows me to deploy this defense without any internal tension, guilt, or self-doubt whatsoever, providing a kind of mental immunity. Since the core self, the damaged, vulnerable part, is completely gone and walled off, I have genuinely convinced myself that my life is entirely determined by outside forces and the incompetence, carelessness, or malice of others around me. I have convinced myself, without fail, that you made me yell. You made me unhappy. You caused me to act out through your perceived failures and flaws, your inability to be perfect enough for me. I am simply an automaton, a finely tuned reactive instrument, reacting logically and justly to your inevitable flaws. I have an entirely external focus on control, and therefore, I am never truly responsible for any consequence. I am merely a product of my flawed environment and your disappointing actions. The shame belongs entirely to you, the partner, the friend, the colleague, and I am free to remain flawless and perfect in my own eyes, eternally the victim. Later, after the argument had subsided and the cold, punishing silence, my favorite tool of control, had become absolutely unbearable for you when you were emotionally spent, defeated, and desperate for connection and reconciliation, I pulled you close. I apologized, but not for the lie, never for the lie itself, because that would validate your reality and negate my entire justification. I'm sorry I got so upset. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I was just so hurt, but it just hurts me so much when I feel like you don't respect my privacy. You know how important trust is to me, and I reacted poorly out of deep hurt and vulnerability because I felt betrayed by your actions and I was scared. A perfect, masterful non-apology, entirely conditional, framing my abuse as a justified reaction to your perceived offense. It kept the blame squarely on your alleged offense, the lack of respect and trust, but offered the comfort and closeness you craved to regulate your shattered emotions and finally feel safe and accepted again. You forgave me instantly, clinging to me as if I were your only lifeline in the storm, relieved the tension had finally broken, and the danger of abandonment was temporarily over. The cycle was complete. Pain, blame, forgiveness, bond. You'll stay because you are fundamentally addicted to the sudden, sharp, temporary relief that always follows the destructive emotional hurricane I create. He thinks he won. He believes he has you right where he wants you, chasing his approval, perpetually stuck in the debilitating cycle of pain and comfort, perpetually trying to return to the false safety and intense connection of the beginning, which only exists in your memory and his performance. But there is one thing that truly terrifies a person like this, a deep existential fear that runs deeper than anything else, a fear of being irrelevant, forgotten, and exposed. And that is a target who refuses to play their game. A narcissist's entire system, the mask, the blame shifting, the gaslighting, the manufactured drama, is an elaborate, utterly fragile structure built entirely to elicit a specific emotional reaction, that essential, life-sustaining fuel of attention and validation. If you stop giving that reaction, if you stop feeding the monster, if you starve the system of attention, the defense, and the drama it requires, the entire fragile structure loses its foundation. It all collapses, and he is left alone with the unbearable silence of his own inner self, the void he spent his life running from, which is his greatest fear and the ultimate punishment. Your goal is not to win the argument, which is structurally impossible anyway because he doesn't fight for truth or resolution. Your only goal is to refuse to participate in the entire performance of the mask. You must not allow yourself to get pulled into this fabricated, distorted, self-serving reality, because once you are in it, you lose your own grip on objective reality and self-worth. Your first, foundational move is to abandon the fantasy that you can rescue them. You must grasp the reality that you are interacting with a facade, a well-built, compelling, and dangerous character, not a full-feeling human being with whom you can have a rational discussion built on mutual empathy. The mask is their entire reality, the only self they have left, and the only self you will ever know. You must stop trying to appeal to their humanity. Do not waste your breath saying, "How could you do this to someone you claim to love, someone who has stood by you through everything, who tried to help you and understand your pain?" They have systematically and successfully rejected their shared humanity and empathy to survive the unbearable shame of their own being. The person you loved in the beginning was an illusion, a temporary, highly targeted role they played exceptionally well during the seduction phase. There is absolutely no real person underneath to save or heal. He is not a prince locked in a tower waiting for a kiss. He is the tower itself, hollow, fortified, and utterly empty at the core. You must stop knocking because no one is home to answer or be saved, and your effort is self-destructive. Your second most critical move is don't take the blame bait. You must hold your reality firm and separate from his, treating his accusations like a foreign language you don't speak or a fictional narrative you are not part of, something you merely observe. When the narcissist uses the "you made me" defense or instantly transforms himself into the innocent victim, do not defend your character, your history, or your intentions. Do not waste a single moment of your precious energy trying to reason with them or make them see your side of the story. They will not hear you for understanding. Their only purpose is to find a counter-argument, invalidate your perspective, and maintain control of the narrative. They will only use your defense, your careful, emotionally charged explanations, your long messages or letters as more ammunition for the next attack and future smear campaigns, documenting your flaws. You must become the gray rock, unresponsive, dull, and uninteresting. Your response to blame shifting must be utterly boring, completely neutral, and entirely devoid of emotional reaction. When he says, "I yelled because you never clean up and that makes me stressed and unhappy, so it's your fault and you caused my pain," simply state, "I hear that is how you see the situation." Do not accept the premise and do not deny the premise. By refusing to accept the shift, you internally acknowledge the truth for yourself, protecting your inner world from contamination and keep your sanity intact. You don't need his agreement for your reality to be valid. Your inner peace is the only validation you require, and denying him the drama starves the bond. Finally, you must understand the grim, unwavering truth about their remorse. Their minds are wired in a way that makes offering a sincere, guilt-based apology impossible for them to process and perform without feeling annihilated and imperfect. Do not waste energy demanding one or foolishly waiting for one to magically appear. If you want proof of their inherent inability to apologize, observe their behavior immediately after a fabricated "I'm sorry." It is almost always instantly followed by the original abuse starting again, or a new, fresh attack, because the temporary effort of the apology has mentally and emotionally drained them, and they must re-regulate by creating chaos and reclaiming control through aggression. They cannot genuinely feel guilt, because true guilt belongs to the person who takes responsibility for their actions, and he has successfully positioned himself as a perpetual victim who is utterly incapable of fault or self-reflection. True guilt would require the mask to be dropped permanently, and that is a fatal risk he will never take. By stepping out of the role he has assigned you, the villain, the persecutor, the cause of their misery, you dismantle the trauma bond and end your debilitating addiction to his conditional approval. Remember, you deserve genuine connection, mutual respect, and stability, not constant emotional competition, high-stakes drama, and dangerous instability. If you've recognized these destructive cycles in your own life, know that you are already halfway to freedom. Recognizing the manipulation for what it is the hardest and most painful part of the entire journey, demanding immense courage and unyielding self-honesty to accept the truth. The cycle runs entirely on your inherent, beautiful need to prove you are a good, loving, and worthy person to the very person who seeks to destroy that belief system for their own regulation. Your job now is to surrender that futile need to prove anything to him and instead prove something infinitely more important to yourself, that you value your inner peace, your mental health, and your emotional safety more than his temporary comfort or fleeting satisfaction. Protect your reality. Hold your boundary with quiet conviction and unshakable resolve, and trust your gut instinct about this person always, no matter what he tries to tell you or how convincingly he performs the victim role. If you found this insight helpful, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Your support helps bring more defensive strategies and crucial information to people who desperately need them. Stay strong, keep learning, and remember that leaving the game entirely is the only way to genuinely win your life back and start living in reality, unburdened by shame and drama.